We talked about how environment shapes culture a few videos back, why some societies put the group first and others put the individual first, how it shapes trust, reputation, the way people deal with one another. This time, we go one step deeper. The food people ended up eating because of their environment. And you'll see it. Food is, quite literally, our identity itself. You'll also see just how astonishingly well humans have adapted. Of course, no civilization ever ran on a single food. Every society leaned on a mix of crops and animals. But almost every civilization had a food at its center. Something that came to the table every day. Something people organized their labor around. Something that set the rhythm and shape of life itself. Everything from wheat fields to Arctic ice. Let's start with wheat. Wheat is one of the crops that has fed more land than almost any other in human history. It began in the Middle East and spread across Europe, North Africa, and Central Asia. Wheat had one decisive trait. You could grow it on your own. A single family could plow a patch of land, sow it, and bring in the harvest. Large-scale cooperation wasn't really required. That one fact may have changed everything. Scholars say that wheat farming regions tend to show stronger individualist tendencies than rice farming regions. It was an environment where the sense of my land and my harvest could take root easily. And once the idea of ownership sharpens, the divide between those who have and those who have less tends to follow. That divide showed up on the table too. In medieval Europe, the color of your bread marked your rank. Finely milled white wheat bread was the food of the haves, and coarse, dark bread belonged to those who had less. Even eating the same wheat, which wheat you ate, told people who you were. Rice is a different story entirely. Rice fed huge stretches of East and Southeast Asia, and it was fundamentally different from wheat. You couldn't grow it alone. Growing rice means managing water, flooding the paddies, maintaining the channels, preparing for drought and for flood. Every part of it needed the hands of the whole village. If one person mismanaged the water, the paddy next door suffered too. Cooperation wasn't a virtue. It was a condition of survival. There's a fair amount of research on this. One team studied a period in China when people had been assigned to rice farms and wheat farms almost at random. And the people who ended up farming rice showed more collectivist tendencies than the people who ended up farming wheat. Same region, same conditions. The difference could emerge not over thousands of years, but within a single generation. Rice was more than food. The shared table in Korea, Japan, and Southeast Asia. The liquor brewed from rice. The rituals around the harvest. Communities gathered around rice, read the seasons by it, and owed one another labor through it. Then there's spice. There was a time when pepper was used like money. People paid taxes in pepper, and they paid rent in pepper. The hot regions of South and Southeast Asia developed a distinctive spice culture. As for why hotter regions came to use so many spices, there are several explanations. One is the hypothesis that many spices have antimicrobial properties, which would have been an advantage in hot climates where food spoils quickly. It's an interesting idea, but there's also a counter-argument that hot regions simply share similar cultures, and it's hard to read this as a direct cause. What's certain is what came next. Spices became an enormous source of wealth. Europe wanted them, and that craving opened the age of exploration. The competition to control the spice routes carved new sea lanes, set off scrambles for colonies, and ultimately redrew the map of the world. Small seeds and dried leaves moved empires. Dishes like Indian curry and Southeast Asian sambal are, in themselves, a record of centuries of exchange and blending. Now, to the coast. If the people who leaned on land learned to read the soil, the people who leaned on the sea had to read the water. Northern Europe, Japan, and the island cultures of the Pacific pulled their protein from the sea. But fishing wasn't something you could do alone. On a boat, many hands had to work in precise coordination, and a single mistake could threaten everyone's life. Labor at sea was cooperation by force. The sea was also an opponent you couldn't conquer. There was no option but to read the seasons, the currents, the weather, and adjust to them. That dependence built navigation skills, and navigation skills carried people farther away. It's probably not a coincidence that seafaring cultures ended up being the ones who explored. Japan's food culture is a case of pushing that relationship to its extreme. Eating fish raw, instead of slowing down decay, it shrinks the time between the catch and the meal to almost nothing. That obsession with freshness may be a sensibility grown out of a life leaning on the sea. Here's a strange one. Most of humanity can't digest milk as an adult. Most people, once they're weaned, produce less of the enzyme that breaks down lactose. Feeling some discomfort after drinking milk is, for humanity as a whole, actually the norm. But a large share of Europeans and some herding peoples were different. They evolved to keep digesting lactose into adulthood. The reason was herding. In groups that raised cattle, sheep, and goats and made milk a food source, people who could digest lactose got more calories, more reliably. After thousands of years, that gene spread. And interestingly, this evolution didn't happen only in Europe. The same kind of evolution happened separately among herding peoples in East Africa. The same environment changed the bodies of two far-apart groups in the same direction. Herding didn't just change bodies. Livestock, unlike grain, is property that can be stolen or raided in an instant. So, in herding societies, reputation mattered. A reputation that says, "Cross me and you will pay for it," was itself a shield protecting your property. Scholars say that societies which traditionally relied on herding more often show cultures that prize honor and retaliation. And there's research suggesting traces of that tendency can still be observed in their descendants. Cheese, butter, and yogurt were foods you could store while on the move. Dairy culture was, in the end, a culture of movement, reputation, and expansion. The Mediterranean ran on something slower. Move to the Mediterranean, and a completely different kind of crop sat at the center of civilization: olives and grapes. These crops have one clear trait: they're slow. An olive tree takes long years before it truly bears fruit. Grapes, too, need years of cultivation and aging to become good wine. These are crops where your child's generation might be the ones harvesting the tree you planted. Growing crops this slow called for a way of thinking that planned far ahead. Long-term soil management, continuity of the family trade, craftsmanship. But what these two crops did to daily life, that part is clear. Olive oil was more than cooking. It was lamp fuel, medicine, a tool of religious ritual, a means of caring for the body. Wine was more than a drink. In ancient Greece and Rome, sharing the same cup was a sign of trust, and which wine you served was a courtesy shown to a guest. As olives and grapes moved into religion, the standing of these crops rose another level. In Christianity, wine became essential to communion, and olive oil was used in baptism and anointing rites. Once they were things rituals couldn't do without, that demand in turn sustained their cultivation. In medieval Europe, it was the monasteries that diligently tended the vineyards and olive groves, and the monasteries that preserved and refined the craft of winemaking. Faith protected the crop, and the crop in turn sustained the ritual, a cycle. Olives and grapes were also goods that could be carried far and traded. The Mediterranean was a sea of ships hauling these crops, and that trade network tied many civilizations into one. Then there's corn. In Mesoamerica, corn was not simply food. In the Maya creation myth, humans are portrayed as beings molded from corn. Corn was a remarkable crop. It was easy to store, could be processed in many ways, and grew even in poor soil. This crop laid the ground for large-scale settled civilization to rise in Mesoamerica. But corn had a hidden trap. Make corn your only staple, and nutritional deficiency follows. The people of Mesoamerica figured out how to solve this. It's a processing method where corn is soaked and treated in an alkaline solution. Going through this process changes the nutrients in corn into a form the body can absorb. Knowledge built up over thousands of years. Later, when corn crossed over to other continents, this processing method didn't cross with it. In some regions that took in the crop, but not the knowledge of how to eat it safely, deficiency diseases spread. Of course, that was a result of other factors working together too. Poverty, a monotonous diet. But this episode shows one thing clearly. Food isn't completed by the crop alone. The knowledge of how to handle it is part of the food. How about where grain doesn't grow? In an environment like this, people can't choose their diet. The environment decides it for them. The Inuit of the Arctic lived leaning on meat and fat in a land with almost no vegetables. Reindeer, seal, whale, and fish were their staples. The remarkable thing is that they didn't develop vitamin C deficiency even without vegetables. Raw meat and organs carry vitamin C. Cooking destroys it. The environment didn't give them a choice, and their bodies found a way. The Maasai of East Africa are another case. They lived raising cattle, leaning on milk, meat, and the blood of their cows, drawing blood from the neck vein without killing the animal and mixing it with milk. Even on a diet very high in fat and cholesterol, the Maasai's blood cholesterol levels tend to be low, and researchers have raised the possibility that they have a genetic adaptation for regulating cholesterol. The nomads of the Mongolian steppe split their diet itself into two by season. They called meat the red food and dairy the white food. In the coldest winter, to endure cold of 40 below, they leaned on the red food, rich in protein and fat. In the short summer, they made dairy in large amounts and stored it for the long winter. The diet itself was a system of survival. Three culture areas, far apart from one another. But they have something in common. A harsh environment forced a meat-centered diet. And that diet changed even the bodies of the people. And in all three culture areas, slaughtering an animal and sharing the meat was not a simple meal, but an event for the whole community. In land where you couldn't survive alone, sharing was the language of survival. These things alone can't explain today's cultures, and that's exactly why this is a series of different aspects of human existence. But the traces of thousands of years of eating and living in a particular way haven't disappeared completely. The things you take for granted, that eating alone feels comfortable, that sharing food with a stranger feels natural, that you feel something ritual-like in front of a meal. I hope this gave you a moment to trace back where that sense came from. Questions, things you'd add, things you'd push back on, all welcome in the comments. I'll add anything I might have missed in the pinned comment. Thanks for watching.